So yeah, this is gonna be the part of the video where I'm gonna explain why I feel like the Ibis Mojo HD6 catfished me. HD6 is nothing short of that. Even though it has a 64-degree head angle and it's super stable. I'm gonna say it. I think this might be one of, ow! And that DVO Onyx really does feel insanely plush and smooth. Tracks so well over these rocks. What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. As we said, we have a lot of bike reviews coming at you guys soon because we started our brand new mountain bike media site, awesomemtb.com. Today's bike review is going to be a really special one. This is actually the Ibis Mojo HD6. A little bit about the HD6. This is actually 165 mils of rear travel with 180 mils of travel up front, and this is a dedicated mullet offering from Ibis. The Ibis has actually had the HD line for a long time now, and each year it seems like the bike gets better and better. And I will say, if there was a catfish in the bike world, it would probably be this bike. If you're not familiar with the phrase catfish, you basically present yourself as something entirely different than what actually shows up in person. And I feel like the Ibis Mojo HD6 did that to me. We'll get more into that whole catfish thing in a little bit. I do want to thank N+1 Bikes for sending this bike in for review. If you guys are not familiar with N+1 Bikes, they are the largest Ibis dealer in the nation. Those guys are incredible, and they actually have some really awesome deals on Ibis Cycles in their specific N+1 exclusive builds. We'll link them in the description of the video. Now, I'm actually gonna take you guys on a ride on this HD6, and I'll give you guys my final thoughts on why I think this bike is a catfish. But let's talk about the build that I'm riding. So for starters, this is actually not an extra large because Ibis actually did away with that 4 sizing, and this is a 4 model, I believe, sizing wise. Now, I'm about 6'2", and I do feel like the 4 was really good for my size. For suspension on the front, I actually went with the DVO Onyx 38, and I actually have this thing set up with 180 mils of travel, which is what this bike comes at stock. I will say that new DVO Onyx 38 feels so incredibly awesome on the trails. It's very stiff, but at the same time, it tracks insanely well. And I think a lot of that traction is actually coming from this crown. They spent a lot of time developing it. We'll actually put a video here when we actually hung out with those guys and they walked us through this fork. Love the 38 on there. I have the Topaz in the rear and it has 165 mils of travel back there. For the drivetrain, this actually has mechanical shifting. So it's actually a GX rear derailleur with an NX shifter. Hot take of the year, I actually think the SRAM NX shifts better than EXO transmission. For the brakes, we actually have code RSC brakes on here. For the cockpit, we have their standard Ibis handlebar and stem as well as their grips. For the dropper post, actually has a KS lev post on here with a WTB Volt saddle. For pedals, I'm running my Deity T-Max. Inside of the bottle, I actually have Tailwind Nutrition's Rapid Hydration. We actually have a coupon code for you guys, Mo and Hannah 10. New Rapid Hydration is awesome. It's actually more electrolyte focused and less calorie focused like the other products in their lineup. For the wheels, these are actually Ibis's carbon wheels with i9 Hydra hubs. I absolutely love the Hydra hubs. And if you're wondering what I'm wearing, this is actually Club Ride's new spring collection. If you guys are not familiar with Club Ride, they make really awesome apparel for on the ride and everything after. The stuff is really breathable, it stretches really well, and the colors are awesome. They actually sent over their Motive tee for me and the Rider shorts. The coolest part about the tee is that there's so many awesome colors. And once again, you guys, I can't stress the breathability enough. The coolest part about the Rider shorts, it's actually made with recycled material, so you can feel better. You're doing your part for the environment and getting really awesome shorts as well. For Hannah, they actually sent over the new Joyride shorts as well as their Bandera tee. Once again, you guys, the colors here are awesome, and they have so many other awesome prints on their website. We actually have a coupon code for you guys. It'll get you guys 20% off all of the Club Ride apparel. I believe it's good for a month, so head over there, pick up some stuff, and thank you, Club Ride, for sponsoring this review. With that being said, let's go for a ride and show you guys why the Ibis HD6 catfished me. All right, you guys, for anyone familiar with Aliso, you know the best place to test out how a bike climbs is the beginning of this ride. That's the trail we're climbing right now. The bike definitely is on the slacker side. I want to say on paper, we're looking at about 64 degrees head angle wise. This is the steepest section. And we're gonna try and clean it. See what we got. Oh, can we do it? Yeah, steep seat angles for the win. Oh man, steep seat angles. They're found on enduro bikes and not XC bikes, which I have a bone to pick with you, bike industry. All right, time for the downhill. And this is everyone's favorite downhill, 5 Oaks. Whew. I will say I've been spending a lot of time on dedicated 29ers. It's always interesting getting back on the mullet, but at the same time too, very rad, because that rear end is so much substantially more nimble. And that is where the true beauty of mullet bikes come from. It's just how nimble that rear end gets. Look how active the suspension design is here too. God, just soaks it all up. The sections, gotta stay on the A game. God, that 64-degree head angle up front. Freaking so nice with that tight rear end. It's a DW link and it is an Ibis bike. So this is definitely gonna be one of the more playful enduro bikes on the market, even given its travel size. And that DVO Onyx 38, so confident inspiring, really adds an insane amount of traction and control from the front end. That was 5 Oaks. I felt like that was almost too easy. Look how freaking playful this thing is. Trail bike soul and downhill bike form, I think, is the best way to describe how this bike rides. If you are from Orange County, you recognize the climb. And you know this is one that not many people choose to opt for. And I keep going back to it. The HD6 pedals so much better than it looks like on paper. I mean, even as it looks like in real life. If you look at the frame, it's super beefy, really bold, spec'd with a Fox 38. I have the Onyx 38. But once again, you get on it and you start pedaling and you're like, this is an Ibis. That classic Ibis style feel climbing wise comes right back to this. And I feel like even if Ibis was to make a 200mm downhill bike, it would somehow still pedal well. And once again, I keep going back to DW Link suspension, in my opinion, being one of the best suspension designs on the market. But I don't know, maybe I'll change my mind later this year. Now, this isn't all downhill. We do have this chunky little section right here, which I guess now is the time where we'll start to talk about the bottom bracket height, because we're getting close to the chunkier bit of this climb. Man, mullets, what I'm starting to realize, those pedals are lower to the ground. I actually just felt the ground right there with my foot. And yeah, that is something that's interesting, is that lower BB height that the HD6 has. I mean, you might notice yourself having to pay a little more attention to where those pedals are. Here we have the infamous rock garden. I love climbing Rocket. I think this is a very good test to a bike's climbing performance as well as human performance. I want to say this might just be the best. I'm not gonna say that. Thinking it through, I'm gonna say it. I think this might be one of, ow, the trail doesn't want me to say it. Do you guys see that? Maybe I shouldn't say it. You guys, I like sliced my finger open. I'm gonna stick to Mother Nature. You and me can disagree, but I do think that this is the best enduro race bike. Dedicated enduro race bike climbing wise. It's like that, we made it to the top of the climb. We still have our finger. Let's go. Oh, oh, oh. Am I Jeff Kendall lead? Freaking personality the HD6 has when it comes time for the downhills. So much stability, like I said, from that aggressive Geo, and that DVO Onyx really does feel insanely plush and smooth. Tracks so well over these rocks, and the bike just has such a freaking on-rails feeling, especially through the chunk. Just right here, pick a line, and just know that the bike has you. God, that HD6 is so good. I'm gonna start calling it that Ibis pop that allows you to get out of those rut troubles. That flare really is what I think makes Ibis bikes unique. And I feel like Jeff Kendallweed, having spent so much time on the Ibis, is freaking so rad, because his riding style and Ibis bikes, I feel like almost go hand in hand. If you didn't know, this is the best section on this trail. Those little corners. I do feel like the head angle's a little too slack for me. And I do wish there was some adjustment when it came time for that, because I think this bike's platform would feel so good with 140 millimeters of travel. And I'm gonna also throw this, the mullet, as much as I love it, and as freaking nimble as it makes the rear end of the bike feel, it does feel a little unbalanced for me. I'm 6'2", and I feel like no matter how much time I spend on the HD6, at the end of the day, I always wish it was the same bike just with 29-inch wheels. So some of you guys might be listening, especially to the end of that downhill, being like, man, does Mo not like the mullet version of this bike? You know what, let's head back to the car and let's give you guys the final breakdown of the Ibis HD6. Now, as you guys can tell, I was definitely very impressed by how the Ibis HD6 climbed. And once again, this is gonna go back to that catfish aspect. When this bike first showed up, you look at this bike on paper, it has 165 mils of travel in the rear, 180 mils of travel up front. They sent it with double downs. So when I first took this bike out of the box and I felt the weight, I kind of looked at everything, I was like, this thing is not going to climb well. I've known that Ibis will never let that happen. I really do feel like, as I said on the trails, if Ibis even made a downhill bike, it would still somehow pedal well. It's just what they do with their bikes. I feel like the DW link plays a huge part of that, but also, like I said, that seat angle being at 77.5 degrees, you really are able to kind of put the power down and just trust that the bike will do its thing. I will also say, besides the comfortable pedaling position, another thing that I did notice is with the mullet and that rear wheel being a little bit smaller, I did feel like I had a little bit more control of my line choice, especially when it came time to climbing switchbacks. I just felt like I had a little bit more control of where the bike wanted to go. Some negative aspects to climbing is I did notice that head angle a little bit more so on the HD6 than other bikes with similar head angles. It just felt, for whatever reason, that front end of the bike definitely felt a little on the slacker side. I do attribute a little bit of that to that mullet setup. Now for everyone's favorite part, and another part of the Catfish, is the downhill. Once again, you guys, this was my first time on a dedicated mullet platform. I'll say Ibis bikes are super nimble and super poppy. The HD6 is nothing short of that. Even though it has a 64-degree head angle and it's super stable at high speeds, anytime you come in and out of corners, the bike definitely has that trail bike style feel to it. And that is a very interesting blend to have to a bike and a tough combo to achieve. It feels like a lot of companies, when they try to go too much on the trail bike side of the spectrum, they lose that stability and that confidence. This is an enduro race bike at the end of the day. This definitely has that enduro race feel to it. It feels very stable. It feels very confidence inspiring. But once again, I just think that Ibis has that magic touch when it comes to DW Link design, and that short chainstay combined with that suspension design, as well as what it feels to be a little bit of a shorter reach. Even though on paper, once again, this is going back to the Catfish, I think they're lying on the geo chart. I could be wrong. Maybe they're measuring stuff differently. So yeah, this is gonna be the part of the video where I'm gonna explain why I feel like the Ibis Mojo HD6 catfished me, if I would buy this bike, and what I think about the bike overall in the enduro spectrum. Now, specifically about the Catfish, me personally, I feel like I spend so much time looking at bikes on paper, studying geo charts, and also looking at how companies are marketing bikes. It's just been something that's always interested me. And this Mojo HD6 on paper, I feel like looks so much more aggressive than it actually is in real life. I feel like when I looked at the sizing chart, especially for the size 4, I felt like what I was expecting was a bike that was gonna feel a lot more like a downhill bike, and something that was gonna be a little bit longer reach-wise, a little bit lower bottom bracket-wise, and a little bit more aggressive chainstay-wise. I will say, when I took this bike out on the trails though, it kind of seemed like everything I was studying on paper just went out the window. I would actually say reach-wise, this felt a little bit shorter than it looks like on paper. Now, once again, I'm 6'2". I do feel like this is a perfect fit for someone who's 6'2", but I wouldn't say this bike is too big reach-wise by any means. It actually felt like a true Ibis Cycles, and maybe they're measuring stuff from different points, but this definitely did feel like a little bit of a smaller extra large, especially in the current bike market. On paper, the bottom bracket of this thing actually appears to be a little bit on the higher side. On trails though, this thing actually definitely feels like it has a little bit of a lower bottom bracket. Now, I'm going to attribute a lot of that to that mullet setup. However, once again, when I got on the trails, I definitely found myself having to navigate the pedals on more technical style climbs. I feel like I was clipping rocks a little bit more, but the trade-off was on the downhills. I also felt like trails that were a little bit more flowy and had a lot more corners, this thing really did feel like it was on rails. Once again, this bike also showed up with double down tires, and another thing that made me think, okay, maybe they're just expecting me to just kind of treat this a little bit more like a free ride style bike. This honestly would probably make the ultimate trail bike if you ran some Maxxis minions up front in the standard 3C EXO compound, and maybe like an Aggressor or a DHR2 in the rear. Same thing, EXO compound, run an air shock in the rear, whether it's the DVO Topaz or maybe the Fox Float X. And I do feel like the build that you're gonna set this thing up with is really gonna drastically affect how this thing performs on the trails. I will say I wasn't the biggest fan of the mullet setup. I'm about 6'2". I feel like for taller riders, you might have a little bit trouble adjusting to the feel, especially when you're in that downhill position. I just never felt like I vibed with the front and the rear being different sizes. I felt like it was always kind of in the back of my head. I don't know if it was a placebo effect or I started getting paranoid, but I just kind of always felt a little bit of that chopper style. However, I did feel the benefits of having a mullet. I feel like the rear end was very snappy. I felt like it was really easy to kind of pop in and out of corners and get in that manual state. And yeah, I am very interested in if they made this bike as a dedicated 29er platform, maybe just a little less travel. But yeah, I think that bike would actually be an insane ripper. I think the HD6 proves that Ibis definitely has something cooking for 2024. And also this bike I feel like would be an awesome bike for riders out there that might be in that size medium category or below, maybe a size small. Because I did feel, like I said, the benefit of having that smaller rear back there, I just felt like maybe I'm a little bit too tall of a rider to fully appreciate it. What do you guys think? Do you guys have any comments about this bike and what other bikes should we review in the future? A lot more bike reviews coming at you guys soon. If you guys can hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, it helps out the channel a ton. Hopefully you guys like this review. Until next time, you guys, ride awesome. Phew.